On my trip to Wrocław, Poland, I found an excellent restaurant in the back streets. The Restauracja Konspira. Admittedly, I ate in this restaurant daily because it was so decently priced. What made me want to go back was the fantastic propaganda posters that lined the walls and the visit to the secret room behind the Wardrobe Museum, full of authentic everyday objects. Once the war ended in 1945, one would think the Polish people had found their freedom, and the rebuilding would start. It did partly, but the Polish people found themselves in the Soviet area of influence, so the German occupant was replaced with the puppet governments controlled by Moscow. But Polish people would disagree with such a state of affairs. During the entire period of the Polish People's Republic, many of them fought against the regime. The post-war armed resistance of the cursed soldiers was replaced by the next generations, who continued their fight with demonstrations, strikes and the creation of the so-called second circulation. In thousands of private houses and flats, conspirators worked day and night writing, printing and distributing illegal content in society. A new war had started internally, which many never spoke about but read about through propaganda produced by the Polish People's Republic. Whilst the men wrote and distributed illegal content, housewives had to master the art of cooking something out of nothing to perfection. The actions of communists, especially regarding the economy, resulted in terrible living conditions, where supplies were scarce and, most of the time, non-existent. Long queues in front of the shops, empty shelves, and shortage of basic products, in a way, started to symbolize the times of the People's Republic of Poland. The first rationing system was introduced right after the war and continued the system introduced during the German occupation. Ration cards were issued to buy such products as bread, flour, potatoes, vegetables, meat, lard, sugar, sweets, milk, coffee and even clothes. After reading the information cards at the restaurant, I found that the symbol of the Dove of Peace was created at the Hotel Monopole in Wrocław, where on a restaurant napkin in 1948, it was sketched by the then member of French Communist Pablo Picasso, for which he received a Soviet Lenin Prize. The Freedom and Peace movement was created by activists who started such groups as the Student Committee of Solidarity and the Independent Students' Union. The movement was primarily involved in protecting recruits refusing to serve or take the oath of faithful service to the Soviet Army, as well as promoting ecology. For many years after the end of World War II, no importance was attached to the deception of history and showing the importance of fighting and sacrificing Poles for peace and the defense of Western values. The Polish-Bolshevik War, held between 1919 to 1930, is a testimony to this commitment and an example of extraordinary Polish-American cooperation. The Polish got through these turbulent times with solidarity. By the time 1968 came about, Wrocław was one of the most critical locations for the student strikes in 1968. In 1977, the first fully independent from the authorities Student Committee of Solidarity was created along with conspirators, the Center for Historical Education. In 1980, the Independent Students Association was founded, where most of the Student Committee of Solidarity members were involved. After delegalizing the association during the martial law period, students continued their activity as an underground organization. Going back to the days of creating, writing, printing and distributing illegal content in society. Then came the time in the 1980s of martial law. In this period, a new term was being thrown about, wirostek. This word journalists of the communist media called the juvenile participants of the demonstration. Television information about the demonstrations usually read, aggressive groups consisting mainly of rosters in the streets. Young people who formed numerous underground organizations were actively supporting solidarity. The largest of them was the Federation of Fighting Youth. As far as the anti-communist opposition of the 1980s was concerned, Wrocław is an extraordinary place. There is a reason why the capital of the Lower Silesia region was called the Fortress of Solidarity. People, as well as organizations that make up the diverse landscape of the opposition in Wrocław, constitute a heritage of which many other Polish cities are envious. Despite that, for many years in our city center, there was no place where the deep-rooted tradition of the underground rock tour could be celebrated. The Regional Strike Committee of NSZZ, Solidarność, Lower Silesia was established on December 13, 1981, by members of the Regional Board of the delegalized Solidarity. On the same day, the first issue of the day-to-day issue of RKS was published, thus becoming Poland's first underground newspaper on martial law. RKS coordinated and organized protest actions, returning to printing and distributing underground press and organized assistance for repressed persons. The most radical and uncompromising anti-communist organization was led by Kornel Morawiecki, who took over and radicalized Bilet and Dolnoslaski. This became a splinter group within the organization. After the introduction of martial law, some of the members of Solidarity, who worked closely with Morawiecki, did not agree with the leaders of the underground Solidarity regarding their strategy. This is why in June 1982, they founded Fighting Solidarity. Since its very beginning, Fighting Solidarity propagated the need to altogether remove communists from power. They had their own publishing house and printed many brochures, books and periodicals, including Solidarity, etc. They also organized protests and street demonstrations. Apart from their propaganda activity, they also had highly developed intelligence and counterintelligence services whose actions were aimed directly at the police and security services. They also provided support to oppositional groups abroad, including the Soviet Union, by publishing various materials in Czech, Ukrainian and Russian. If you had visited Wrocław, you would have come across many dwarfs. These are erected to commemorate the protests at that time. More on this subject to come.